cell phones. If you are on Twitter, we do encourage you to tweet the program and please use the hashtag NPCLive. For our C-SPAN and public radio audiences, please be aware that in the audience today are members of the general public. So any applause or reaction that you just heard is not necessarily from the working press. And now I'd like to introduce our head table. I please ask that everyone hold your applause until everyone has been introduced. Beginning at my right, at the far end, Paula Gwen Grant is Secretary of Communications for the Archdiocese of Washington. Father Charles Cortinovas, he's Priest Secretary to the Cardinal. Father Daniel Carson, he is Vicar General and Moderator of the Curia for the Archdiocese of Washington. Kevin Winsing, retired U.S. Navy Captain, Chair of FCA Americas, and the club member who arranged today's luncheon. Lori Russo, President of Stanton Communications and co-chair of the Headliners team. Skipping over our guest, Elena Isela, producer for EWTN's The World Over with Raymond Arroyo. Ann Augerton, managing editor of the Arlington Catholic Herald. Christopher Gunty, associate publisher and editor of the Catholic Review Media. Dr. Jerry Pattengale, senior advisor to the president and founding scholar, Museum of the Bible, and associate publisher of Christian Scholars Review. Dana Ritter, Washington Bureau Chief, CBN News, and I'd mentioned our co-chair of the club's broadcast podcast team. And Michael Phelps, former publisher of the Baltimore Examiner. Thank you, one and all. I'd also like to acknowledge additional members of the Headliners team responsible for today's event, besides the miraculous Kevin Winsing and Lori Russo at the head table. Thanks go out to Donna Linewan. She is also co-chair of the Headliners team, the press club staff, specifically Kate Helster, Caitlin Cotter, and Executive Director Bill McCarran. I also want to send a shout out to the folks in our Broadcast Operations Center because without them, I would not be able to do this. So, at the end of 2019, the Vatican reported that nearly 18% of the world's population, or more than 1.3 billion people, were members of the Catholic Church. 665,000 of them belong to the Archdiocese of Washington, where today's speaker serves as the 7th Archbishop. Wilton Daniel Gregory was ordained to the priesthood in 1973, just 5 years before the College of Cardinals elected the first non-Italian pope in 4 centuries, Pope John Paul II. The white smoke emerging from the Sistine Chapel chimney that day was a signal that the church was changing. Fast forward to November 28, 2020, less than 1 year ago, when the church experienced yet another historic change, the elevation of then Archbishop Wilton Gregory to the rank of cardinal, making him the first Black cardinal from the United States and the highest-ranking Black American in the church's history. Cardinal Gregory has used his position to address some of the church's most public issues, most notably the crisis of sex abuse by Catholic clergy. During his tenure as president of the U.S. Conference Catholic of Bishops, the Charter for Protection of Children and Young People was implemented, setting a zero-tolerance policy for sexual abuse of minors by priests. He again used his position to speak out on social issues in the days following the murder of George Floyd, condemning acts of racism and defending the rights of all people. He has also called for greater inclusion of gay and divorced parishioners and better representation of people of color in the church. Most recently, Cardinal Gregory weighed in on the debate over whether Joe Biden, only the second Catholic to serve as President of the United States, should be allowed to participate in the ritual of communion. While the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops continues to consider denying communion to Catholics like President Biden, who support the right to an abortion, Cardinal Gregory has said publicly that he has no plans to prevent the president from accepting the Eucharist. The Vatican echoed his sentiments recently, warning the bishops not to use the Eucharist as a political weapon. So many questions today. We look forward to hearing about all this and more. Please join me in giving a warm, in-person National Press Club welcome to His Eminence, Wilton Cardinal Gregory.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for your very kind words of welcome. And I would like to thank all of you for your kind invitation to be with you today. We come together at a truly anxious time in our nation as we continue to contend with the impact of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, as well as a number of global and local humanitarian, political, and social issues. The implications of the convergence of so many weighty matters that are affecting us as citizens, as neighbors, and as a society. As members of the National Press Club, you are the ones we rely on to keep us informed, updated, and connected as a global community of various faith traditions. You have been helping us through the pandemic with vital, pertinent information, as well as needed inspiration to stay hopeful as we endure quarantine and health restrictions. You have shared our stories that show the impact and resilience of our rural and urban communities of families and seniors. Like all industries, journalism has certainly changed over the years. Technology has expanded your reach and ability to share our life stories, our dreams, and our hopes. You are the professionals with just the right words, who immerse yourselves in a community, a situation, or even a crisis, to bring us the facts, the people, and the takeaways that can help us work toward living in true peace and equality for all without the threat of violence or harm. As you go about your responsibilities in the quest to share the unbiased truth of the human condition or circumstances, you are guided by industry standards and ethics in your professional work. No matter your personal faith tradition, or as Pope Francis often says, even if you are of no particular faith tradition, you are indeed united as colleagues in your vocation to responsibly discover truth and share it in an impartial way. You hold accountable leadership and citizenry alike in promoting human and civil rights for all people at all economic levels and in all realities that make our nation truly blessed, from its founding to the current day. It is you, the modern-day American journalists, who amplify community voices, speaking out against injustice and inequality, who are asking for needed change in our systems and long-held practices. It is the powerful impact of your multimedia images and carefully written words that help us connect with the world's citizens fighting for the exact same hopes and dignity. Daily, we see the rich and connectivity of social media that often reveals far more than any of your individual media outlets can share. Moreover, it does so 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I, along with my sisters and brothers in leadership in other faith traditions, rightly participate in the good that social media outlets offer us to share our consistent messages of hope, perseverance, and love for the Creator. Yet we cannot overlook or fail to recognize the destruction and blatant vulgarity that is often also present in social media and other areas of life, where great harm is done by fraudulent, unverified, and biased information that passes as news. This affects both current and future generations. As a society, our measure of what may be appropriate in media and everyday life is certainly vastly different from the decades of the recent past. Our sense of respect has been overridden by a craving for continuous positive or negative attention. We often forget and dishonor our shared humanity. We each have a responsibility, not only you as our journalists, but all of us, to use our daily words, social media posts, public commentary, and personal involvement to care for our neighbors in tangible ways that work for justice at every level. It is because we see the violence and hatred, the racism and gender discrimination, the injustices and inequalities in regards to our environment, housing, hunger, education, and opportunities. It is necessary that our actions and words magnify these issues and work towards equitable solutions. When we encounter unjust treatment of any of our neighbors because of race, socioeconomic, or immigration status, do we stand up and defend their dignity? This is a question both for you in the news media and for all of us who have a public role in society. We can indeed uphold the best of civic responsibility in what we present to the world. This was recently seen so admirably, yet again, in our American military, as our soldiers held and carried infants, assisted children, senior citizens, and families in Afghanistan as they exited their homeland under the dangerous violence of the Taliban and ISIS. As the women and men who serve our country in the military always do, they honored and respected the dignity of the people of Afghanistan while they carried out their mission. We are incredibly grateful and thank our military members for their honorable service. We are called to do the same in our lives each day. In my world as a priest and bishop, the Holy Father, Pope Francis, of course, has an essential role in shaping my work, indeed my very life. However, he rightly is also an inspiration far beyond the Catholic Church. Pope Francis often asks us to step up and care for one another in very tangible ways. His passionate calls for us to welcome immigrants and to protect the earth, our common home, resonate and inspire people around the world, including me. One way I am asking the people of the Archdiocese of Washington, Catholics and non-Catholics alike, to share in Pope Francis's concern for creation is through our new Laudato Si action plan, which was only recently promulgated a couple of weeks ago. We are called to protect and restore our fragile earth and its natural resources according to our ability and our means. Found on our website, our action plan contains small and big ways for us to exercise stewardship over God's creation. we are also sharing numerous touching stories of hope and responsible citizenship of those in our metro community who have been doing this work for many years. When it comes to environmental justice, we each have a critical role to care for creation, to ensure the earth is protected for future generations. In addition to the essential reporting that you do on disasters, the pandemic, and political upheaval, I hope you and your editors also think it is important to spread the truth about efforts like Laudato Si's and plan, which aspire to improve our world. After all, the words in every story you write and share motivate us to some kind of action. You ask our government and community leaders about systemic structures, laws, and regulations in a quest for the truth and an attempt to hold them accountable. I too receive these genuine questions from you and have for many years, as we in Catholic leadership are asked about living our faith in our modern-day world. We are also properly held to account as we work to repair the horrendous injury of our sexual abuse crises. I have always believed and known that a church that is accountable is a healthy, thriving church. Catholics and all people deserve ongoing answers from us in the Catholic hierarchy. Abuse of any kind should never occur. If it ever does, answers are owed in full truth, along with full accountability. As you well know as journalists, words have the incredible power and ability to build or to damage or to destroy. A few weeks ago here in Washington, D.C., we marked the 58th anniversary of some historic words that still ring true as guidance today, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a master wordsmith, spoke of his great dream for our country. In his I Have a Dream speech, Dr. King's words spoke of the civil and human rights we are all due when it comes to employment and true freedom. Each day of our lives should be dedicated to using our voices to uphold human dignity and nurture our unity, not to focus on divisions. As our news media outlets, you have a part in leading us in civility, online, in print, on television, or on the radio. Civility and respectful dialogue for the purpose of earnest understanding can and should promote most especially, be promoted most especially when we hold different or even opposing political, religious, or other opinions. On any given day, we define our national identity and should not be of it should not be of negativity or division. We must intentionally speak and act in ways that promote respect, peace, and justice for all people, not an atmosphere where hatred and violence can grow. As people of various faith traditions and goodwill, we must build on the wisdom of our experiences and remain hopeful in the face of life's many challenges. Moreover, we know that challenges will indeed come to our personal lives and our life as a community. We are challenged by so much: illness, injustice, violence, weather-related disasters, poverty, and even terror, as we will collectively remember in a few short days on the 25th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks. Through it all, anxiety attempts to grip us. However, We must maintain hope and not become discouraged by the difficulties that we face. By prioritizing that which brings about the common good, serving our neighbor will generate the healing our planet so desperately needs. Our encounters, conversations, and yes, even our news stories should reflect our shared experiences as a human family. You are instrumental in telling our stories and keeping us connected with the reliable information we genuinely need to be safe, informed, and responsible citizens. May we treat one another with respect as members of the human family, daughters and sons of the one Creator. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Cardinal. So now we get to the question and answer section, which I have really been waiting for. So just a reminder to folks in the audience, if you do have a question, there are these nice little cards on your table. You can send the cards up and pass them down the table, and we'll be sure to get your question in, or at least if I can read it, we will get it in. So Cardinal Gregory, since you started with COVID, let's go there. Everyone here, of course, today is vaccinated, and we're all following good protocol. You're finding your COVID vaccination card? Yes, 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 yes. But as you know, there are members of the Catholic faith who have questions about being vaccinated, some religious concerns. What's your message to fellow Catholics who are concerned about being vaccinated?
Lisa, let me begin by saying, yes, there are Catholics who have some hesitation based on either a direct health concern or some even expressing a hesitation related to a religious principle. However, the Church has given some pretty decent support in the fact that Pope Francis and Pope Benedict have both been vaccinated. And I've talked to some Catholics about this, it's difficult to say that I have a religious concern when the last two pontiffs have already been vaccinated, and where Pope Francis has so clearly, and may I say with great insistence, urged Catholics to take the vaccine. It doesn't diminish their concern, but it certainly puts their concern on a pretty shaky platform. I think the other concern is this. The vast majority of Catholics, from all that I can read and personally experience, have either had the vaccine or intend to have the vaccine or are supportive of having the vaccine given to their loved ones. And the few, and I don't know what that number would be, but they sometimes capture the image that it's a 50-50 situation. And that's just not the case.
Since the pandemic entered our lands, there's been a dramatic change in everything that we do, including receiving the Eucharist and communion. Can you talk a little bit about those changes in the Catholic Church and whether or not those changes will continue even after the pandemic hopefully leaves?
I'd have to begin by saying that the pandemic and its impact on our life as people, as global members of a global world, we don't know exactly where this is going to lead us. We're in uncharted waters. In terms of our religious practices, the Archdiocese of Washington has tried very, very carefully to abide by local governmental and civic requirements. Our churches have been applauded, our schools have been applauded for their hard work on sanitation and making sure that the environment is cleaned and properly cared for. We've had to hold back on a number of activities that Catholics had grown very familiar with, receiving communion under both species, both the precious blood as well as Holy Communion under the Eucharistic bread. We've also had to stop some of the things that we love doing, good, robust choir and music, signs of peace during the Eucharist, and activities around the altar. So those things have been altered. I think they are returning. How quickly they will return, I cannot say.
That's fair. So you and I represent a little bit of history up here. You are the first Black cardinal. Talk a little bit about...
In the United States.
In the United States. In the
Right.
United States. Well, okay, Black American.
Right.
There you go, cardinal. Talk a little bit about the experience of being in that role and any challenges that you may have encountered being in that role.
Lisa, having heard your introduction, you know a great deal about my background. I'm a convert to Catholicism. I was born and raised in Chicago. Please don't hold that against me. But having been raised in an urban environment, like many African-American Catholics, the schools were a primary vehicle for entering the Catholic Church. And so it is with me. When I knelt in front of Pope Francis to receive the biretta, the ring, and the assigned titular church, a lot of that heritage was running through my head at that time to our church. I'm still trying to figure that out.
So interesting that you should bring that up, because I am wondering specifically about, race reconciliation. We're in a post-George Floyd environment. So what role should the church be playing, or what role is the church playing in leveling the field there and potentially bringing more Black Americans back into the fold of the faith?
Well, certainly we as Catholics, whether we are Black Catholics, brown Catholics, white Catholics, or any Catholics of any ethnic background, we have a responsibility, because of our faith, to be on the forefront of the justice movement. It's not something that should be foreign to any of us. It is clearly something that I think African American Catholics in particular, need to be aware of, that, as the scripture says, to him to whom much is given, much is required. I think one of the things that's going on now in the media, and you folks are, I think, a very welcome energy behind this, is that we are more and more aware of the importance of seeing the whole panoply of our racial identity woven into our national identity. You know, as well as I do, that since the George Floyd tragedy, there's been a concerted effort, I believe, on the part of industry, economics, business, sports, entertainment, to be more inclusive. So programs that probably have been on the air for years and years, that maybe had few, if any, faces of color, they have faces of color now.
Yes.
And that's a good thing, because it reminds us that if we're going to grow as a nation, everybody has to be at the table.
So I have to ask this question because I know that there are many race and ethnicity editors out there that are going, well, but what do you do to convince young Black Americans who have left the faith in droves and believe that Christianity is the white man's religion? What are you saying to them? What are you doing to convince them to bring them back into the church?
Lisa, let me expand that a bit as I'm trying to respond. We have a problem, and it's not just a Catholic problem, it is a religious problem, with passing on the faith to the next generation. I have been very fortunate to be involved with ongoing Jewish-Catholic dialogues for many years. And I can remember in any number of those meetings, conversations, the Jewish community, the representatives of the Jewish community and the representatives of the Catholic community were describing the same crisis, that their children are not embracing their religious heritage and identity. They may say, oh, I was baptized a Catholic, or I went to Catholic school, or I made my bar mitzvah, or I'm of Jewish heritage, but it's a description rather than a practiced or lived reality. So whatever we need to do as Catholics, I think would only be enhanced by talking to our fellow religionists who are facing the same issue.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So, we need to talk a little bit about the sex abuse instances. Yes. Your predecessor, Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, who was very popular here in the Washington, D.C. area, he recently pleaded not guilty Friday to sexually assaulting a 16-year-old boy during a wedding reception in Massachusetts nearly 50 years ago. Can you discuss more the structure that the Catholic Church has in place to investigate priests who groomed students who, when they were minors, and then pursued sexual relationships with them after they turned age 18?
I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed not with the discovery, although that's certainly a part of my embarrassment, but I'm embarrassed because it is absolutely contrary to everything that I, as a priest, my brother priests and bishops, should be pursuing in terms of serving our people. When I've seen images of Theodore McCarrick, whether recently as he pled not guilty or early on when this whole sorrowful event occurred, my first thought was about the people that he had hurt. I think you asked, what are we doing to help address this? I think one of the things that we're trying to do, and we still have to work on it more effectively, is we're trying to make sure that the proper attention is put in the proper place. The people who should get our sorrow and our concern and our compassion are those that were hurt. Those that hurt them, the perpetrators, should be held to the same criminal justice that anyone else who creates such a scandal should be held in. But I think one of the things that I've come to understand is that from the beginning of this crisis, we began to focus on the wrong entry point. We began to focus on how should the church be protected, or how should the clergy be addressed. The first entry point is, how do we care for those that have been hurt? That should be the first issue that we take up. And we're still trying to do that. It's difficult when you see the depth of the problem. I'm very fortunate. I grew up with some wonderful, wonderful priests whom I admire. Most of them are already with the Lord. And I know that in my own life and in the lives of countless others, they provided extraordinary pastoral service. And I felt aggrieved that some of these old men, and they were old men by the time this hit, would have to die with this shadow.
It seems, though, that the Catholic Church has traditionally taken a very defensive mode and many steps to protect those who did that harm. You know, moving priests around from parish to parish, and some would say that is still happening in some places in this country. So what's the solution there?
Well, first of all, as you have already alluded to, when I was president, we adopted the Charter for the Protection of Children and Vulnerable Young People, but we also took this position that no one with a credible allegation should ever be in public ministry. No parish should sit there and look at the priest who is celebrating Mass and to say, I wonder, has this guy got a problem? That's not possible. Now, the other thing, though, that's difficult, and I'll use a legal term, if I assign a priest that has absolutely nothing in his background written or reported that he has done anything wrong, and I assign him, and years later it's discovered that there was something that I didn't know about. The legal world says you knew or you should have known. I can only act on that which I know. And I do it clearly, honestly, straightforwardly, and I will continue to do it. When I was the Bishop of Belleville, which was my first diocese after being auxiliary in Chicago, I encountered a number of very, very awful cases. And I happened to say publicly, and I meant it, I will resign the see rather than assign a priest to harm a child. And I said this in a number of environments. I don't have the right to take a chance with your children. I do not have that right.
Okay, so another question that might be kind of tough. Does celibacy among priests add to the problem of sexual abuse in the church? And is celibacy, is that something that's called for in the Bible, or is that a man's call?
The celibacy is a church tradition. It is the church's practice in the West, among the Latin Catholics, that asks that a man who is preparing to be a priest live a celibate, unmarried, chaste life. Some ministers who were entering the Catholic Church and happened to have been married men in their prior religious service to enter the church and to become priests as husbands and fathers. So it's not absolutely necessary. What is most disturbing, in my humble opinion, is not celibacy per se. It's the unhealthy personalities that hide behind celibacy or use it in a way to conceal some very unfortunate and, sad to say, unhealthy behavior. And, you know, every once in a while, as the media covers this issue, they write about it and they say, you know, Father A, Father B, Father C, Rabbi B, who was married and has children, also harmed children. And so, yeah, we are the Catholic Church, we are the 800-pound gorilla. But we've got some other small relatives that have demonstrated that same type of incredibly sick personality behavior.
So appreciate your frankness. This is so good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Last week, President Biden, and this is a question from the audience, last week President Biden said he did not agree that life begins at conception. Were you surprised to hear that? And can you clarify the Church's teaching on when life begins?
The Catholic Church teaches and has taught that life, human life, begins at conception. So the President is not demonstrating Catholic teaching.
Okay.
Now, among the theologians, there's all kinds of medical issues about when does conception take place. When is it at implantation? Is it at some point when the sperm and the ovum come together and create a new reality? And theologians have debated that and continue to debate that.
Has the Catholic Church softened on abortion? And let me do a follow on that. And the reason why I'm asking about that is because of all the different things that we're seeing now. And if you can give us your thinking about the new abortion law in Texas. You know, it outlaws abortion when a fetal heartbeat is detected as early as 6 weeks into pregnancy and well before many women even know they are pregnant. So where does the Catholic Church stand on, I guess, abortion in 2021, which apparently is very different than the issue of abortion, say, in the 60s or in the 70s?
First of all, our church has not changed its position on the immorality of abortion, and I don't see how we could, because we believe that every human life is sacred. Every human life is sacred. I was very fortunate to have served for 10 years as the auxiliary bishop for Joseph Cardinal Bernardin, the Archbishop of Chicago, who ordained me bishop and then tried his best to train me how to be a good bishop. But he has been identified as the author of the consistent ethic of life. Life concern, but those life issues have to extend to all of the other moments of human existence as well. His consistent ethic teaching says that the prisoner, the immigrant, those with physical or emotional handicaps, the very aged and terminally ill, all fall under the issue of the dignity of human life. Now, that position has generated and continues to generate a lot of conversation. Some would say, well, is he saying that a prisoner who has been found guilty of multiple criminal behavior, is he to be equated with an infant in the womb who is just trying to live and to be born eventually? Oh, no, he's not saying that. He's saying they are linked not because they are the same, but they are linked because they are all human.
So since you used the example of a prisoner, tonight in Texas, 6 o'clock Eastern or so, a Texas death row inmate is set to be executed. I know that you have written extensively about the death penalty. In this particular instance, the death row inmate has asked that the priest or the minister
Yeah.
lay hands on him during the course of the execution. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, and anything else you want to say about the death penalty.
Well, first of all, I think the death penalty has many different facets to it. And as we've discovered over time, it's not always equally applied. The poor, people of color, immigrants, are more susceptible to having death penalty sentences handed down than the wealthy, affluent, who can afford, the best legal defense available. I don't know the full details of this execution that is scheduled to take place, but I do know this, that if this man wants to pray with his minister or have his minister pray with him, it might very well be a sign that there's some reconciliation, conversion going on within him. Should he be allowed to meet his Creator, having the support of a pastor? I say yes, but I also say, because the death penalty has also been proven flawed, there's too many cases where people have been sentenced and, unfortunately, I think, put to death, and then with the development of scientific research, it's been proven, or at least raised to a serious doubt, that maybe the trial itself was flawed.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like I want to have like a rocket round with you because we're running out of time.
A rocket round?
Yeah, like a rocket round. And
I don't know what that means.
Well,
but
I need like kind of quick answers.
Okay.
Okay. But I'm not, and unfortunately, these are not really yes or no, but I'm going to try to start with a yes or no real quick here, last 5 or 10 minutes here. Will the Catholic Church ever allow women to become priests, and should it?
The answer is no. I don't believe that, and I think that was from St. John.
So let me get your clarification on that. Are you saying no, that women should never be priests?
I'm saying that's our belief, that's our custom, our practice. I don't see it changing.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about.
You said fast answer.
Yeah. Fast. That's amazing. Okay. What is the Catholic Church doing about to help Afghan refugees who are coming over from Afghanistan? You touched on this a little bit in your opening remarks.
One of the things that we're doing, certainly here in the Archdiocese, but I think we're doing it in other dioceses across the nation, we are collaborating with social agencies to help these people find homes and be settled. We do so with a number of agencies that already exist, Catholic Relief Services, Catholic Charities, and other social agencies that collaborate across the spectrum.
Talk a little bit about what you're doing for other immigrants, because I know that the Catholic Church is really, really active on the U.S. southern border in Texas with Mexico and immigrants that are coming in that way.
We're trying to basically do the same thing to, first of all, to make sure that they are treated with human dignity. Those that are fleeing violence, hunger, poverty in their own country, we're trying to make sure that they receive a warm welcome. But there's another dimension to that too. We should be working with the countries from which they are immigrating to make it less necessary for them to immigrate.
Mm-hmm. On Monday, and this is a question from the audience, you preached the National Labor Day Mass. Can you talk a little bit more about the church and workers and labor unions? and how the Catholic Church is potentially supporting labor unions.
It goes back to Leo XIII, Rerum Novarum. Over 100 years ago, the Pope wrote an encyclical supporting unions and the rights of workers. He got into a lot of problems. So Pope Francis is not alone. Leo sided with workers, and that offended many of the affluent people of the day and the corporate and business world of the day. But the church has been following that lead since Leo XIII.
Okay, so for folks who read their Bible,
Yes, ma'am.
we're seeing all kinds of stuff now. Pestilence, wars, earthquakes. You can't tell what season it is. Are we in the last days?
Fast answer? I don't think so. What we're doing, I think, is experiencing the opportunity, the necessity of taking charge of our environment more effectively. Whether you are a proponent of climate change or energy programs that step away from fossil fuels, you have to acknowledge that if we don't get a handle on this, things are going to get worse.
So do you believe in climate change?
I do. Does that make me bad? You know?
No.
That is, you know, Lisa, to be honest, there's a lot we don't know. I don't want to say, you know, the scientists who are working in this area, they're still discovering, you know, the impact and the possibility of solar energy or wind energy. And so there's a lot out there that is still being discovered. But it's pretty clear that we need to find ways to protect our environment so that the next generation, and I believe there will be a next generation, will inherit the benefits of the earth and God's creation.
Wonderful. I've got one more thing I need to say before we get to the final question.
Okay.
So before I ask the final question, I'd like to let our audience know about some of our upcoming National Press Club events. Tomorrow, September 9th, I am going to have the pleasure of interviewing Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas. He's going to join us for a Newsmaker event, so come back tomorrow. And on October 20th, we will honor NBC's Lester Holt with our 4th Estate Award. If you haven't purchased your ticket, you need to buy your ticket. So stay tuned to press.org for more events to be announced soon. So, our final question. Okay, before you get the coveted National Press Club mug. There are some very spirited rivalries among the Catholic high schools in this area. Oh, yeah.
Please don't put me on that.
Oh, yeah. In the Archdiocese of Washington. One of them continues 1 month from today, October 8th, as DeMatha and Gonzaga face off on the football field once again. So we need to know. Who are you going to be rooting for?
This is going to be more than a yes or no answer.
You've got time.
My chancellor is Terry Farrell, and he and his family are desperately DeMatha representatives, and Terry went there. If I wear a mask, and everybody has these masks now that, you know, parade what school or program. If I wear anything but a DeMatha mask, he probably won't speak to me that day. Gonzaga is obviously an important Catholic presence here, and my secretary's sons went to Gonzaga. So when Gonzaga and DeMatha play each other, I don't come into work that day. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming to the National Press Club, and there's our coveted National Press Club mug. I'm just going to ask you one more quick question. Sure. Since you're from Chicago, but you've been in D.C. all this time now, the Bears or the Washington football team?
Always bloom where you're planted.
Amen. Amen.
Which is a Chicago statement.
Well, I want to thank everyone again for coming out to the National Press Club today. I want to thank Cardinal Gregory for joining us and for a very spirited conversation. Please do continue to participate in National Press Club events. Check out our website, press.org, for upcoming events. And thank you so much. Have a good afternoon.